thank you everyone for being here bright and early, 9:30 in the morning. That's pretty early for me as a software engineer. I like to roll into the office around 10:30 or so. And it's particularly nice to be drinking my Iron Goddess of Mercy tea, knowing the backstory behind it now, so that's pretty special. It's great to be in Wales. This is my second time in Wales in the past 2 years. I was out here for a technical conference called iOS Dev UK in Aberystwyth, just up the road. So sort of making a habit of this. And the reason I came that time and why I was so eager to come again is that a small slice of my gene pool is Welsh. My great-grandmother, Alice Davies, was born in Rhoshanaclugog. Sorry, I need more phlegm in my throat. Near Wrexham. Here she is on the right, looking very, very stoic. And she's part of a big family. And when she was 6 years old, there was a huge earthquake. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of this. The earthquake was in San Francisco. And so her father was a builder, and he traveled halfway around the world, 5,000 miles as the crow flies, but it was much longer, I assume, going around I don't know, had the Panama Canal been built by then? I don't think so. So he moved to San Francisco, and he sent for his wife and 6 children. And later, when she was in her 50s, she found out that she was actually 3 years older than she thought she was because they had lied about her age to get a discounted fare on the boat. I'm serious. And that's basically how I ended up on this planet, at least in part. Here's Alice's oldest daughter, Phyllis, my grandmother, dressed in her little Welsh girl outfit. Back in those days, actually, the Mission District in San Francisco, which many of you may know as an enclave of hipsterdom and fixed-gear bicycles, was actually the Welsh neighborhood. And that was where the Welsh immigrants would congregate. There was a Welsh-speaking church. So Phyllis grew up in San Francisco, and when I got to know her when I was born, I and pretty much everyone else called her Nana. She was grandmother to 5 of us siblings, and she was the only grandparent that we knew. She lived right around the corner, and she was a daily fixture in our lives. All the everyday moments, all the swim team drop-offs, and forgotten homework at home that needed to be rushed back and retrieved. She was just part of the fabric of every single day. And when I left the house, when I went off to college and all the things that came after, she always mailed me newspaper clippings from our local town paper. We grew up in a town of 10,000 people with little sticky notes attached that said, "Thought you'd enjoy reading this," in her perfect handwriting. Love, Nana. And sometimes it would be magazine clippings of a movie review. She thought I should see a movie, or just something that she thought I would enjoy reading. She was always looking out for things that she thought others might benefit from or enjoy. She was also very tech savvy. She was an enthusiastic early adopter of the iMac. She had one of the original teal iMacs with the hockey puck mouse. She later moved up to an iBook, and when the iPad came out, we got her an iPad, and she got right into it. Here she is, her 2 killer apps for the iPad were Solitaire and email. Email was, that was the reason to compute for her, because it allowed her to keep in touch with family and friends. And most importantly, she was, as many of us probably have, she was the grandma forwarding articles. Sometimes they were really silly, photos of the cat hanging from the branch in the tree. Sometimes it was links to a news story. She and I were both great baseball fans, and she would send me stories about our beloved San Francisco Giants. And it always felt like she had plucked something and set it aside just for you. And it wasn't just about the article, it was about the intention behind it. She brought a similar approach to food in everyday life. I still remember as a little kid having sleepovers at her house and waking up the next morning to heart-shaped waffles and her scrambled eggs that she always made in this very particular way that I've never quite seen replicated anywhere else. And when I moved off to college and I would come home for a weekend visit, she would shove Ziploc bags of triple brand muffins and ginger snaps into my hands for me to nourish myself with when I was on the drive back to Palo Alto. It was, those everyday moments were the way that she showed devotion to the ones that she cared about in her everyday life. She passed away in December, just a few months ago, and I brought some of her ashes to scatter here in Wales. I think she would have enjoyed that. And when I think about the relationships that I have with other people in my life who I care about the most, my parents, my dearest friends, my wife sitting here in the back with my very quiet and obedient 3-year-old son. And you probably have some of these same feelings too. You connect and you build these relationships over lots and lots of these everyday moments, these shared meals that are about more than just the food, these stories that we tell to one another, that we share with one another, that help us to see through one another's eyes. These simple acts performed in communion, where breaking bread isn't really about the bread. And that's what life is about, I think. And instead, oftentimes we find ourselves driving down the motorway, stuffing fast food into our faces, or you're out at dinner with your spouse and you're both staring at your smartphone, kind of ignoring one another's presence. It's these things that are so essential to our nature as human beings often end up getting pretty shortchanged. It feels like maybe there's a connection between the artificiality and the ultimate unsatisfaction of junk food and the mindless, sort of fleeting enjoyment of clickbait, top 17 photos of cats that think they're people online. It takes this essential ingredient in life and distills it and kind of distorts it, and you end up injecting it straight into the vein, and it's not really what it was before. When I hear social media gurus and technological futurists say content consumption, I think of pigs feeding at a trough. It sounds like this mindless biological urge that we're satisfying, and not something that we're choosing of our own volition. If diabetes is the disease of affluence and mass-produced factory farming, I almost think that informational diabetes is the end result of mindless overconsumption. A while back, I was driving in the car, and I came across this interview on public radio with David Remnick. He's the editor-in-chief of The New Yorker, one of the most brilliant people around. And he was, I sort of tuned in mid-interview, and he was talking about how his favorite reading experiences have the feeling of a drive down the road through the country, and you come across a small family-run restaurant. And you walk in, there aren't any guidebook reviews about it. You show up, there isn't a menu. And you just sit down and you eat whatever the chef has prepared for you. Okay, it's not mine. It's this very bespoke, it's not a infinitely reproducible experience. It's something that feels uniquely tailored to you. And just like, for me, the experience of reading The New Yorker is, it shows up in print form, and it's this sort of cherished artifact. It feels like it's made just for me. I really like that description, and that's kind of where I got this, the notion to mix, food and reading together into a single talk, which is kind of weird when you think about it. And it makes me think of the rise of the slow food movement, where you consider the origin, you consider the farmer, you consider the farm, and you purposefully seek out something that's distinctive to really savor. Sitting around a shared table with good friends and good wine. It's not just empty calories being deposited in your gut. And I think maybe there could be a similar value in slow reading. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but that could mean consciously disconnecting, being out at dinner with your spouse and taking both of your phones and stacking them in the middle of the table, and whoever touches their phone first has to get up early with the kids the next morning. Or, going on a trip to a far-off corner of the world where the cell phone reception isn't that great, and kind of forcing yourself to pay attention to your surroundings and those everyday moments. I almost, in San Francisco, there's been this rise in popularity of the so-called paleo diet, paleo eating. Has anyone heard of this? You're eating only things that your ancestors would have recognized as food, as they were being stalked by a saber-toothed tiger. And maybe we'll see the rise of a paleo information diet where people deliberately consume less. And they artificially constrain what it is that they consume to avoid this feeling of being overwhelmed, kind of evolving from the industrial feedlot mentality to grazing on the open plain. So how does this relate to what I do and my job and why I was invited here to the DO lectures? So 5 years ago, I quit my job at Apple. I was a software engineer working on the iPhone. And I quit because I met someone who I really enjoyed working with. We weren't sure exactly what we were going to do when we started. But something that kept coming up over and over that gave us a lot of inspiration was this feeling of trying and failing to drink from the informational fire hose online. And this fear of missing out, the feeling of never being caught up, and wanting to create a feeling of sitting by this rushing stream and just kind of dipping your cup in and savoring what you scooped out and not feeling angst over what was streaming by. And we thought that one of the best ways to solve this problem, not the only way, but a very powerful way, was to use a filter, essentially a human filter. If you're gonna limit what you consume in the online world, a great place to start in terms of that constraint is the collective taste and interest of the people that you're connected to. These can be real-world friends. They can be experts whose opinions you find interesting. We think that that's a great starting point if you're trying to cut back and focus on the things that you care about the most. And we think of it as building a personal magazine just for you. And one of the ways you can do that is by having editors who you've chosen, whose taste you respect, and whose recommendations you care about. We still have a long way to go on this front, but this is the essential mission of Flipboard, which is the company that I started several years ago now. When we launched in 2010, Time Magazine named us one of the top 50 inventions of the year, which was pretty cool. Today we have a team of about 150 people in Palo Alto and New York and a few other places, and over 100 million registered users around the world on iPhones and iPads and Android devices, both of which I'm carrying with me this weekend. But when we were getting started, we had no idea whether what we were doing would register as a blip in the universe. We were a small team, literally in a garage in Palo Alto, as the stereotype goes. We would go out for a walk around the neighborhood and pass the garage where Hewlett-Packard was started, kind of pause, nod our heads, and go back to our garage, which had graffiti painted on it. And we were just kind of working away and didn't really know what was going to happen or whether there would be any impact. We had these ideas about ways of conquering information overload, but we didn't really know how it was going to shake out. And then Steve Jobs unveiled the iPad to the world. And at that moment, actually, we had been planning on building the first version of Flipboard for the desktop web. It would be something that you would fire up on your laptop, and you would be using Flipboard. We had already come up with the name at that point, but we weren't really sure what it was. And when the iPad was released, we decided pretty much on the spot to build the first version for the iPad. Flipboard ended up being kind of one of the early seminal apps for the iPad. But to us, it felt like a huge risk. We weren't really sure if anyone was going to buy an iPad. It felt like this very sort of calculated, potential huge mistake that we were making. So we cobbled together early prototypes. We were rushing. We were working night and day. Here's some early sort of from the primordial soup, what we were thinking of in terms of putting lots of different content on the screen. It obviously doesn't look very beautiful or scannable here, but this was the early crude attempt, sort of banging sticks and rocks together and trying to build something that felt like a personalized magazine. And then about 2 weeks before we launched, in July of 2010, we had a very special visitor lined up to come to our office. So everyone was at their desks at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning, which is a pretty early morning, bleary hours for an engineer who's been up until 2 in the morning hacking away the night before. But the whole team was there pretending to work at their computers because Steve Jobs was coming. He was good friends with John Doerr, one of our investors in the company. And they would go out for morning walks in Palo Alto on the weekends. And this morning, they John happened to steer Steve by the office, and lo and behold, we were all there. And I've not told this story really publicly before, so I hope you enjoy it. Steve walks in and he kind of looks around. We have this very minimal office, white floors and walls and ceilings, white IKEA furniture with Apple products on top of it. And the first words out of his mouth were "This looks like an Apple store," because we'd already spent quite a bit of money at the Apple store recreating it in our own vision. And that's how I found myself sitting on this, IKEA furniture that I had assembled myself, demoing the first version of Flipboard to Steve Jobs, who to me was an absolute giant. When I was a teenager and graduating from high school, in my high school graduation speech, I was the 17-year-old quoting Steve Jobs to all my bored classmates, talking about, do you want to sell sugar water or do you want to change the world? After I graduated from Stanford and with my computer science degree, this was 2003, so tech jobs were not easily had. I was sitting around unemployed, living with my brother. Now, you come out of a university with your computer science degree, and you immediately get scooped up by Mark Zuckerberg in a black town car. But I was unemployed. I applied for a job at a record store as a clerk in Berkeley, and I got rejected. And then through a friend of a friend, I got a connection to my dream job at Apple. Sort of showed me the importance of just casting your net wide and getting to know people. And when that friend of a friend happened to be in town, I was working away on a project for one of my computer science classes. So he assumed that I was a trustworthy, hardworking, enterprising guy who he could recommend for a job at Apple. And later at Apple, about halfway through my time there, I joined the team that was building the first iPhone. And I used to work in fear of Steve Jobs, stalking down the hallway and seeing what I was working on and, firing me on the spot. It was sort of that fraught, emotional relationship. And here he was. I'd finally left Apple. I'd never had any interaction with him when I was at Apple. And I was demoing to Steve Jobs this product that my team and I had been slaving away on. And he was asking these very sharp-pointed questions. And two moments in particular from that meeting, the whole thing was very unforgettable for me. But there were two moments that really stood out. And I'd like to share both of them with you right now. The first one involved fish. Steve was up in arms that particular day about the health of the oceans. And he was saying that there would be no fish left in the ocean in 30 years, and that our grandchildren would see fish as farmed freaks or museum specimens, not as wild animals. And he sort of went on to say that our insatiable appetite for this good thing was going to lead us down a road to disaster. And what were we going to do about it? We weren't really sure what to say. That's kind of a tough one to answer. But we kind of redirected the conversation back to what we were trying to talk about. But it was it was sort of this we've looked at each other many times, Mike and I, after that interview, after that meeting, and we talked about remembering the fish and the importance of supporting important content online, and the right content. The second bit, which I thought was the most poignant for me, was when he was talking about movies. I learned later that Steve Jobs was a huge film buff. He was into the golden age of classic cinema, films by Alfred Hitchcock, that sort of thing. And he talked about going home after work and sitting down on his couch and flipping on this channel that we have in the U.S. called Turner Classic Movies. Shows films from the golden age, whether it's a well-known classic or something that's just obscure and old, whatever it was. And Steve said that he enjoyed turning on this channel and just watching whatever was on, which was kind of mind-blowing, because this is the guy who, I'm pretty sure he had an unlimited iTunes gift card. He invented video on demand. He brought that to most of the consumer world as we know it. And here he was saying that he watched whatever was on TV like some sort of peasant, just because. And this was what he said that stuck with me. He enjoyed that because he liked knowing that a few thousand other people. This is pretty niche television channel. That a few thousand other people were sharing that exact same experience at that exact same time. That shared experience with basically strangers, and just knowing that other people were feeling the same thing as you at that time. These two vignettes still really stand out for me, and I think about them a lot. The world of temporary abundance leading to irreversible unhappiness, and this essential communal nature of human experiences. And I really think, like I said before, that's how we turn calories into bread. That's how we turn content into stories that we share and retell, whether that's through the hyperlinked social web, or whether that's through a shared newspaper clipping mailed with a stamp licked and deposited on the envelope, or whether that's sitting around a communal campfire with our fellow cavemen telling stories about the stars to one another. It's a movie that we watch with strangers just to know that someone else is feeling the same thing that we're feeling. And these moments add up to connections with the people that we care about most in the world. It's not about immediate overindulgence or gratification. It's about durable happiness. And these things come in short supply. They aren't infinitely reproducible. And their memories are how we stay close to the people that we care most about, especially after they're gone. So that's it. Thank you.